Oilfield Workers Trade Union continues to threaten to strike as the period of reconciliation for Petrotrin workers' wage increase expires. The OWTU President General Ansel Roger says should the union strike, it will create a major political fallout. Sherilyn Lewis reports.
OWTU President General Ansel Roger says should the union carry out its threat to strike, their protest will not only be about their discontent with the wage negotiations for Petrotrin workers for the period 2014 to 2017, but also the inefficiencies of the state-owned company and the company's poor performance.
Petrotrin, for quite a while, has been politically paralyzed and plagued as a result of political patronage. You would also and always recall the OWTU saying that the politics which manifests itself in placing people in the top positions at Petrotrin has on numerous occasions resulted in Petrotrin's poor performance.
The OWTU president said, if anything, it's the Petrotrin workers that have held the company together.
Is that the strike itself will bring to the fore not just wage and salary issues, because there's too much focus on wage and salary issues alone, and not enough or no focus at all on the performance or the inefficiencies of the company's operations, which led them to and which will continue to keep them in this situation. Petrotrin must not be dependent on oil price alone.
And in a show of solidarity with their comrades, the joint trade union movement JITAM, in a statement, called on the public to reject what it called this unwarranted first salvo, which resembles in great detail the attacks which have traditionally been unleashed on trade unions. JITAM has urged Petrotrin and the Minister of Finance not to be responsible for placing the country in an industrial relation crisis. It stated, Labour is painfully aware that should the Minister of Finance succeed in the imposition of a wage freeze, the same will quickly follow in the case of all other collective bargaining negotiations affecting all trade unions. Sherilyn Lewis, CNews.
The CEO of the Energy Chamber, Dr. Thackeray Dax-Driver, expresses concern about the impact the planned strike action of Petrotrin workers will have not only on the company but the country. He spoke on CTV's Good Morning Trinidad and Tobago.
CEO of the Energy Chamber, Dr. Thackeray Dax-Driver, says Petrotrin has to be very careful if the workers do strike. He said with the company's oil production still very low, it needs to attract investors, and if workers do not carry out their functions as necessary, they can lose the possible investments.
Petrotrin, it has very large debt obligations it has to meet. Because it's a state-owned company, those are tied to the country's debt rating, so the international rating agencies will look at the ability of Petrotrin to repay the loans. If they think there's question marks about that, that puts additional debt burden onto all of the citizens of the country.
He said the country can also be downgraded by the rating agencies,
which means borrowing becomes more expensive. So in a situation where the Minister of Finance is having to borrow to keep the country, keep expenditure from the government going, that puts more cost on us. So it's a sort of a downward spiral. So I think that is a major a factor that the country has to consider, not just the fuel, but also what it means for our debt.
He noted Petrotrin is a larger earner of foreign exchange and uses a lot as well to purchase crude oil. He said there is need to improve the country's output in that regard.
Increasing domestic crude production has a big impact on the availability of foreign exchange. Now, if we're having to buy fuel internationally because we're not producing it in our refinery, that is also a negative on our foreign exchange situation. So it has these much wider implications beyond just driving and moving people around.
Dr. Driver was speaking on CTV's Good Morning Trinidad and Tobago.